A tuatahi māku, e tautoko ana tō mihi ki te matua I Rongarawa. Ngā mihi ki aia mo tōna manaaki tiaki e whiwhi mai ki a mātou te rānei. Ngā mihi ki a koe mo tēnā. Tuarua, e tukuna atu a hau ngā mihi poroaki ki a rātou, te hunga wairua, rātou hinga mai, hinga atu, tēnei rā inanahi I tērā rā, I tērā wiki, I tērā mārama, I tērā tau. Haere atu rā ngā mātua tupuna, moi mai ro te tariki. Kia koutou e whakarongo ana ro te hui nei, koutou ia hapu puta no te motu, tēnei te mihi nui, te mihi aroha, te mihi whangaungatanga, kia koutou katoa, e nohane wainga nui ki te whakaako te hitori o Ko Huiarau, me ere atu mā o ngā take e pāna ki te kaupapa. Nō reira, kia koe ngāwai, tēnā koe, e tukuna mai te wānei ki te whakamārama. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia mai hui tātou. Kia ora again, ngāwai. People are asking, what is Ko Huiarau? Where has it come from? What can it do? And what can it do today? And a lot of people that may have heard of the kaupapa, a lot of them think it's just a Westminster sort of system, you know, to do with trade, etc. That's only magically appeared with the arrival of Pākehā or Ngāti Wikitoria. But the history of Ko Huiarau, and these different kōrero that go with this, of course, depending on who's the kōrero. A lot of, up to probably 5 years ago, most of us would have accepted, all the ones I know, would have accepted that Kupe had been the one that supposedly had got here first 1,000 years ago. And of course, in his time, his wife had called this place Aotearoa. It's only over the last 5 or 6 years I've seen and heard of the older kōrero that goes back to the tupuna hako or hagoff. And so the Ko Huiarau has actually started in his time, and of course others will have other kōrero too that might go further back than that. But I'm only going to talk to what I've seen in the whakapapa going back to Hako Hagoff, who's recorded as being born 88 BC. And so he's supposedly the tupuna that got here that actually made the triangle, the Pacific Triangle, that became Te Moana Nui Kiwa. And so that triangle is made up of Hawaii Nui being Hawaii, Hawaii Roa, Aotearoa, and Hawaii Pāmamao being East Island. So you've got now a time frame. The Ko Huiarau itself, the name itself has come from the gathering of the hundreds, and it's like I say, it's somewhere in the time frame of Hako where they met in the centre of Te Moana Nui Kiwa at Raiatea, which is probably 100 miles off Tahiti. And they would meet there every autumn. And that's gone on, you know, that history went on for centuries. And the kōrero given to me by a friend of mine, schoolmate of mine, who'd actually went on Te Aurere when it did its journeys up into the Pacific. Paul Lenol is the friend who's passed away a few years ago now, but he was the one that actually went into the Pacific to learn the history of Ko Huiarau. Can you hear me up there, Ngāwai?
Yep, you're doing great.
Okay, just making sure in case I'm talking to myself.
No,
sorry about that.
Fine.
And so yeah, it was even though that history of Ko Huiarau is mostly based on the hundreds, that it was the waitangi of the day in that time. And so they, for centuries, they met at Raiatea until a chief rata, the kōrero given me is he had a liaise with someone's wife, and he'd been killed, and they massacred his body. So when that happened, our tupuna from Aotearoa, they never went back there. They actually put a curse on it. Now, one of the stories of that rata is it's his son, who was also called Rata, that went to build the waka to go back over there to do utu for his father. And that's the story of the rata who didn't do his whakamoimati. And when he went back to the tree the next day, it was back up again. So that's father and son, that kōrero, pertaining to the Ko Huiarau kaupapa. Now it's after Cook has got here in 1769, is when our tupunas were sailing on those ships, as crew for whaling, sealing, etc. And so hopefully a lot of, all you ones that are out there have watched Mahinarangi Forbes' video, so would know the story, would know the kōrero of how for 40 odd years from the time of Cook, our tupuna sailed around the world, and in that time they saw the danger coming from those ones from the north. So in kōrero with their whanaungas of Te Moana Nui a Kiwa, they decided to reinstate Ko Huiarau. Now, one of the reasons why the Ko Huiarau kaupapa was given to us, it goes back to a whakapapa line going back to Paikea. I don't know if I can't remember if I talked on this last week, but now what this pertains to now is the tupuna Paikea's father at that time, Ue Nuku Rangi. He'd had two wives. One was the Ariki line and one wasn't. So Rangataro was the mother of Paikea and his brothers. And the second wife, Paimahu Rangia, was the mother of Ruatapu. Now, Ruatapu, wanting the mana of his Diariki lines, he actually invited his brothers out fishing, and then he sunk the waka. And it's Paikea that got away on the whale. And so Paikea actually got here to Aotearoa. And so when they made the decision to hand over the guardianship of Ko Huiarau to someone, that's why they gave it to us. So coming down through Paikea in the whakapapa, Ruatapu's line, I better remember. Now this kōrero here came from a wānanga that was held in at the marae in Manurewa in 1999, and was given by, and the kōrero was given by a tohunga who was promoting the Ko Huiarau at that time, Maki Ruka. Maki Ruka was also with the United Nations in the indigenous side. So what he was explaining there is that Ruatapu went on to be the eponymous ancestor for the Moriori, and also for what became the rangatiras of the Takitimu Waka. So when you look at the whakapapa coming down from Paikea, I'm only talking about where it comes down into our lines of the Muri Whenua. So it goes something like Paikea, Pouheni, Tu Whakatara, Nanaia, Paraurangi of the famous Ngāti Parau, Ueroa, Wahine Tokerau, Iwi Pupu. And it's Iwi Pupu who marries Tamatea Pokai Whenua, who's the son of Muri Whenua. And Tamatea Pokai's father is Rongo Kako, which is Muri Whenua's husband. So who was the rangatira of the Wakataki Timu. And so with the hononga, or the marriage of Tamatia Pōkai and Iwi Pupu, that's the coming back together of those two brothers of Paikea and Ruatapu. And that was the significance of Kahangungu. So it's all a big whakapapa thing, the Ko Huiarau kaupapa. And when you take it back to Hako, you know, there's different, there's a whakapapa out there that I can send you that'll show the descent lines going down to the main wakas came through.
Brilliant.
Yeah. I won't talk to that now, but
yeah.
So what happens then is that when they agree to reinstate Ko Huiarau, it's done at Okoroire in 1808. What the chiefs have agreed to at that time too, because the ones sailing on the ships, they saw the benefits of uniting under one person, and this is by them seeing what had happened with kings and queens overseas. And so in their time, they had the seven waka rohe going at the time, and each of those waka rohe, the paramount chief, was called a Taiopuru. So in 1808, they chose one to be the Taiopuru, and the rest would stand down and become the arikis. And so those lines there became the upper house, I suppose, of Ko Huiarau, along with the Taiopuru.
Yeah.
So that's in 1808 at Okoroire, and just out of Matamata. And the reason why they had it there is that is where Tūrongo and Mahinarangi had Raukawa, supposedly in the hot pools there. And again, it's a whakapapa thing. And so when you go back, and what that hononga was about was uniting, it was about uniting Tainui and Kahangungu. And so when you go back to Kahangungu, the whakapapa to that, Kahangungu, Kahu Kuranui, Lake Hukuroa, Tu Puru, Rangi Tuehu, Tuaka, Mahinarangi. So this whole thing is still a whakapapa thing, even going into 1808. And so when they had the hui in 1808 at Okoroire, they chose one Taiopuru to be the Taiopuru. So the one chosen was Waikato Tairea. And so it's actually his sovereign seal that actually goes on to the Mandate Treaty in 1840, sorry. So again, it's not just this trade kaupapa, it's not just a look-alike Westminster Parliament setup. It had already been in place, Mairano. And so that Parliament, so when it was put in place in 1808, the first of the sittings for that Parliament at that time, for Runanga for want of a word, was actually 1816. And so it's the mahi done at that time. 1816 is supposed to be the first liaise of Waikato Tairea and King George. It's then later when these two ships that get confiscated in 1830, 1831 sometime. And when that ship got confiscated is when the next liaise is with King William. So the reason why the two ships got confiscated is in 1830, the French king was in the Hokianga. the Taiopuri befriended him. And then anytime he was sailing on those Ko Huiarau ships were actually sailing from out of the Hokianga from around 1825. 1825 is the documented time of when the shipbuilding started in the Hokianga. And so 1830 is when, and then written in the Ko Huiarau archives, is when